Hi, it's Krista Watson here from Christa Quilt, and I'm going to show you how to fussy cut fabric. Today I'm working with my Geopop fabric to create a quilt called Infrastructure, and part of the design I want to show off these really fun diamond shapes. Now in this particular pattern, in this particular fabric, I've got orange diamonds and I've got purple diamonds, and I'm going to show you how I can isolate the motif to cut some of those, even though it's going to waste a little bit of fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fussy cut some strips. Then I'm going to cut the strips into these smaller squares. So let me show you how that works. For this particular pattern, I want to get a shape that's the size of this little center column in this fabric. Now, I'm not necessarily giving you particular numbers because this can work on any size that you want, and the specific shapes and sizes that I'm cutting are in the infrastructure pattern. So what I need to do first of all is I need to isolate one of these columns. I can either do the orange one or I can do the purple one. And because I know that the size of the column right here is the finished size, I'm going to mark a line indicating the finished size. So I'm just using my ruler as a straight edge, and I've got a washable marker. This is actually an air erase marker, so it's going to erase after a little while, so I don't have to worry about it being permanent. And I'm going to mark one line, and this is going to be my sewing line, not my cutting line. But this is my guideline to tell me where the mark needs to go. I've done it on one side. Then I'm going to flip the fabric around and I'm going to do it on the other side. And this is going to be the exact size that I need, the finished size. Now, if your finished size were bigger or smaller, you could find a different area on the fabric that you wanted to highlight or fussy cut. So once I have my lines drawn, that's the finished size. Now I have to add seam allowances. Now this is a little bit more work than just cutting straight strips, but it's worth it if you want to get a particular result. So it's hard to see on the video, but I'm lining up my line that I just drew with the 1/4 inch marking on my ruler so that I can add a 1/4 inch seam allowance on one side. So I did it on one side, now I have to flip it around and do it on the other side. And by the time I've added the seam allowance, my little mini strip is exactly the size that it needs to be. So once I've got my mini strip ready, I need to do the same thing to cut a square. And in this particular square, I'm going to be able to get 2 diamonds. The next diamond is going to go into the seam allowance, so I'm going to waste about every other diamond, but that's okay because by the time I'm finished, it's going to look really good. So I'm going to do the same thing. I need to isolate the area that's going to be the finished size and use my straight edge to mark one side, and again flip it around the other way. You'll notice I'm working with smaller pieces of fabric. Even if I have to do a lot of them, I'm still going to cut off some of the fabric so that I don't have to use big long pieces. It makes it a lot easier. So now my 2 little diamonds in the middle are isolated. I can add a 1/4 inch for cutting on one side. Then I can flip it around and add the next 1/4 inch for cutting on the other side. And again, these lines are all going to disappear. So right now they're just temporary. And once I've done with that, I've got one little fussy cut square I can add to the other squares I've done, and I'll just continue that process for as many squares as I've done. Now this particular square was kind of at the end of the selvage, so I may or may not use this one. If I need to use this piece, I can always hide that in the seam. But now that my squares are ready to go, I can sew them into my project. If you want more information about the quilt along or the fabric, please visit ChristaQuilts.com and see the links below in the notes.